I don't know. So last time we were talking about securing sessions. We're thinking about how do we secure a session. And the one thing I've been thinking about is session hijacking. So what is session hijacking and how do you hijack a session? Right? Well, if we use a unique ID and store that in a cookie, and then we store that the cookie gets passed with every request from the client to the server, right? And then we could also pass a cookie back to the client, write it to the client. If I give them ABC, I give Bob ABC, I give Carson DEF. If I don't know who's making a request to me, I can't see them, right? And Bob says, and I get a request, and it says it came from ABC, right? I can know that, okay, this came from Bob, right? And there's this information associated with it. Or if it's DEF, then I know that came from Carson, and different information is associated with it, and give DEF access to different account information, ABC access to different private account information. So if they're passing me that cookie and somebody somehow is listening on the network and they see that traffic and they say, oh, okay, all I need is a cookie that says ABC and make a request to that website with the cookie ABC, they then create their own cookie, put ABC into it, right, and then send it to my website, and I think, oh, that's coming from Bob, but it's from somebody else. So the session got hijacked. So, well, let's maybe encrypt the cookie. Would encrypting solve session hijacking, Daniel? Right, if I just encrypt it and give them an encrypted value, well, when the encrypted value comes back, cool, I decrypt it, it's the right value. So the hijacker gets the encrypted value and sends that to me, and I decrypt it, cool, it's the right value. So encrypting doesn't really help. So there's a... When we talk about encryption, right? So if I'm only encrypting and decrypting with a private key, right, that's it. Like I encrypt it, I give you the encrypted message, you never know what's in it, you send it back to me, I decrypt it using the same key, right? Well, then that doesn't provide any security. Another level of security would be public key cryptography, right, where I have a private key. And this is just like FYI, right? Here, let me see, what's the good picture? Public key. I have a private key. I have a private key that, so let me see, that Bob will encrypt something with the public key and send it to Alice, and then Alice can decrypt it with the private key. You need the key, the private key, to unencrypt, but the public key. So that'd be another way. Right? So somehow I could have some encryption. So basically the long story is like just, the easiest way to do a session is always HTTPS. Because when it's HTTPS, anything that's traveling over the wire is encrypted. And so you don't have to worry about it. And since that's really used, a lot, it's been optimized and hardware has probably been built to do that quickly, right? And so if you don't want somebody to hijack a session, HTTPS. So you just do it secure. And so it's interesting to think about that now, like when you look around, right? Like if I go to Amazon, it's just Amazon, or is it Amazon HTTPS? It's just Amazon. You can see what I've been looking at. Doorbells and dresses. Doorbells and dresses, there we go. And screaming movies. So, right? But if I start to go to an account, right, now I'm HTTPS. What happens if I'm logged in? I go back here. I'm back at home page. I'm still HTTPS. So as soon as I went to the account, it locked everything down. It said, okay, you're now in the account area. This is a secure area. We're giving you a cookie. We're sending it to you over the wire, encrypted, because we're using HTTPS. And when you send it back to us, we're using HTTPS. It's encrypted. Okay. And now when I go back home, right, it's encrypted here because I'm on that session or whatever, because they've given me a unique ID they don't want anybody else to get. So interesting just to kind of look at that as you're looking at websites, right? And if you ever go from HTTPS, you're in a secure area and you got your unique cookie, you go to HTTP, well, now that cookie can be grabbed. It's no longer encrypted. So. And there's articles out there that talk about this. And I was just doing a little perfunctory reading. Session management is the core of web security. Right, so I didn't read this article yet, but different things. I thought this was funny, so I just pointed out, we're using PHP, and things are getting a bit slow. So this guy was thinking about storing all of his data in a cookie instead of a database. Right? Like, let me just put all the user stuff in a cookie. Why is that not a good idea? For a variety of reasons. Okay, right, because cookies can be deleted. So it's only good for sessions. And every request, that's more data that has to be sent back and forth. So you're going to get another level of slowness there. But some of the stuff I saw here was like this. In order to protect the session ID exchange from active eavesdropping and passive disclosure in network traffic, it's mandatory to use an encrypted HTTPS connection for the entire web session, not only for authentication process where the user credentials are exchanged. Additionally, the secure cookie attribute must be used to ensure session ID is only exchanged through an encrypted channel. So I guess there's an attribute on the cookie that allows us to do it secure. So if we go to godoc net HTTP and we look for a cookie, right, and we have type cookie, and is there something in here secure, right? So we can say, hey, this can only be sent over secure. And so if we set that, then the secure cookie attribute must be used to ensure the session ID is only exchanged through an encrypted channel. I guess the cookie doesn't get exchanged if for some reason there's a mishap, right? And like only send this over secure. That's kind of cool. Like we could set that in our cookie. The usage of an encrypted communication channel also protects the session against some session fixation attacks where the attacker is able to intercept and manipulate web traffic to inject the session ID on the victim's web browser. So that's pretty much what I saw when I was researching it. Though I did learn some pretty interesting things about security and encryption and that stuff. I was looking at Go has there's a interesting example. I'll bring it up. And I put it in here under AES encryption. And here's the link to it. So this is like separate from, cookies, right? This would be like, what might you use this for? I'm not totally sure. But anyhow, this is what it does if you run it. I'll show you the article. So you could take anything and you can encrypt it. And so hello world encrypted is that. And then when you have this, you could unencrypt it, right? Decrypt it, I guess is the right way to say that. And so to do that, there's like there's the AES, which apparently is military grade encryption. And then there's also Cipher. And there's this thing about blocks when you start looking into cryptography. So that's one of the things I want to learn about. So if anybody ever sees a really good book or a really good course about cryptography, let me know, because I'd like to check that out. I was just looking at Pluralsight puke test. That's not quite what I was going for. I think that's what the officers use to see if you've been drunk driving. They give you a puke test. You get like a really greasy hot dog and hold it right in front of you, and if you vomit, you're guilty. So this looks like it'd be pretty awesome. Cryptography, hour and 30 minutes, fundamentals, but I don't want Java. Anyhow, something I want to learn a little bit more about.
Don't they have a cryptography course at Fresno State? Computer Science Department?
I don't know anything about the Computer Science Department at Fresno State.
Oh, isn't that the department you teach in?
It is a department I teach in. I don't know. They probably do. CSU Fresno Cryptography. Computer Science. There we go. So there's some there. All right. So that was just kind of like the follow-up to us banging our head against the wall a little bit on Tuesday and the time we spent on that. So today I just sort of like, how many people have a presentation they're ready to kind of give? Cool. Anybody else? Just one? All right, so I'll show you something and we'll do some code. We only have one person ready to give their presentation. And how much time you need? 20 minutes? Somewhere around there?
Like 10.
All right, so we'll definitely save some time. So that gives us to at least 5. Right? And then we'll check out your presentation. But I've continued to work on this Twitter app. And so we left off, we were down here kind of looking at Gorilla. There's some JSON stuff, which is interesting, and then there's a photo blog. But I've been working on a Twitter example. Have I showed you guys the Twitter example? I did, right? Things to come. I didn't show you that last week. So let me just show you kind of what I have going so far. And as actually it's still running. Let me just make sure it's the right one that's running. So yeah, that's right. My mouse still isn't working. I need to take both these mice back to Best Buy. All right, so localhost 8080. You saw this? Yeah, you guys saw this. So I've added to it a little bit. So there's that where you could log in. And I'm just putting this in as a placeholder to sort of like do a little, design. And now here's create account. And I'll just show you the functionality first. What? I've talked you out of the class already? Come on. We could use more coders. No, come on, please, don't go. This is good class. Coding's great. What? 2 more? I can't believe it. No, you guys, coding. What are you doing? Dang, we're down to 6. There's a lot of one-on-one teacher focus. So what would be some of your thoughts when you have a form? Like, what do you want? You want to validate it, right? What are we going to validate here?
Proper email.
So it has to be a proper email.
Whether that email's already been used or not.
Okay, maybe we want emails to be unique, right? So only one person can sign. What if somebody signs up with somebody else's email? So we probably should do that thing where we send them an email and verify your account, right? Your account's not active until you verify it, and then if you never verify it within 2 days, we delete that. So
Twitter name probably has some rules about it. I don't know what they are, like no spaces or something.
yeah, so Twitter names, we probably don't want to allow people to do exclamation points and different funny symbols, so only certain characters, right? So that'd be something else we'd want to validate. I have not built that in yet.
Maybe the password has to be a certain length.
Password has to be a certain length, and that the passwords are the same, right? Create your password, retype your password. Does Google have you kind of confirm your password when you create a Google account? I just basically looked at Google for like, oh, this is best practices.
I think almost everybody does.
Everybody does when you create your password?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you create your account? I think so. So check this out. I go here and I start typing, and I get all of the possibilities, right? I get that drop-down menu, which is fine. So I'm going to go with test 22 for some reason. And then here, on Twitter name, here are the Twitter names that are already taken, since I have access to Twitter's database. There are the Twitter names that are already taken. Hound Dog, Hound Doggy, QWERTY. Okay? So I shouldn't be able to use any of those. Hound Cat, that's fine. Hound DOG, whoa. Hound DOGG, fine. DOGGY, no. Somebody has that. That's awesome. Right? So that's Ajax. Not leaving the page. It's not having to like go reload a new page and tell me it's taken. It's checking it right then. Okay, I could go with Hound Dog. 24. 22. And here, let's mess up my email. Okay? And then here, let's mess up my passwords. So those don't match. Create account? Nope, sorry, your passwords did not match. Clears them out, re-enter them, right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Create account. What? My email was okay. I can't believe it let that through. Example, we're going to delete that one. Because that's just normal HTML5. This is an email validation. So let's go back and without the @ sign. I guess it's just checking for the @ sign. Hound dog 24, 22, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There we go. Need at least the @ sign. So that's what it is checking for. Create account. And now that's been stored in the data store. Awesome, man. That is so awesome. I can't believe my mouse doesn't work. Why does my mouse not work? You guys want to see the code?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start out with sign up. That's the sign up page. So when I was building this, I started building it sign up form right here, validate. And I like to build just straight in HTML. So temp sign up. And I do that so that I can do this. And I can see it right there. Right? And you guys have already seen WebStorm's dynamic live update, right? How many have not seen it? Okay, so I could take this URL, copy it. I come back to WebStorm. I could go up to edit configurations right here for live update. And I could create a new JavaScript configuration, or I'm just going to edit this one I already have. I'm going to get rid of that URL, put this one in, and then hit OK. And then I could run debugging, which is going to refresh this page. So I could bring this over, and I could bring this over, and as I change things, things change, right? Live update. So I love that. All right, so I'm just going to undo that.
Did you write this code from scratch, or did you have a reference?
So yes, always, dude. I am building on what people have taught me, right? Like I've learned all of this like by looking at other people's code and by like going to trainings and reading books, and just like you're doing, like somebody knows something and I learn it from them, and then I look at their code and I like integrate it into mine. So, and then like I'm stuck, so I go look something up on Stack Overflow, right? So one of the things I didn't want here is a drop down as I'm entering things. You see that drop down came up? I don't want that drop down. So I'm going to show you how to get rid of that.
So that's Ajax control right there, that drop down suggestion box.
Excuse me.
Todd, did you say that was Ajax that you had to use for the...
Yeah, no, not the suggestions, but you can do that with, like here at Google, right? That's not Google. And by the way, this is a really interesting thing if you want to learn about people. You could just type in and see what suggestions comes, because the suggestions are going to be tailored to what they've been searching for. So like when I'm at conferences or I'm watching other people work, I often will be like, what comes up when they type in stuff? Like, I've been looking for that stuff. Justin Bieber, I don't know why that's associated with me. I haven't been looking for Justin Bieber. But Julian Schmidt Router is definitely... Isn't that funny? He's so popular that he's one of... If you type a J, Google thinks you're going to Justin Bieber. Wow, dude. Yeah, that's Ajax right there.
Who's Julian Schmidt?
I asked that same question too, which is why that was in there. And he's a student in Manila, Philippines. So trip out on that, man. He's just like a student.
Go workspace.
Huh?
On these computers, in the Go workspace, he has a folder. Julian Schmidt.
Oh yeah, because he created a router for Go. He's just a student somewhere of computer science, and it's a nice router. Right. So instead of using the default one, there's some things you're going to see it here in a second. All right. So first thing is just like I'll do my design in HTML. Okay, that's the first thing. And this is all broken out in steps. So starting at the very basic UX design and using Flexbox. So Flexbox is a way to do layout. We'll learn that in the spring in the HTML, CSS class. So if you're going to take that class, then we'll spend some time with Flexbox. Yeah, cool. And but that's all this stuff. And if you want to get your hands dirty with Flexbox before CSS tricks, Flexbox CSS tricks, complete guide to Flexbox. The thing you have to remember about Flexbox is basically this is applied to the containers, everything on this side, right? When you're reading, everything over here on the left. And this is all you need to understand Flexbox right here. Everything over here on the right is applied to items, right? You can see this is for items. Flex items is for flex container. So a container allows you, when you have a container, right? Like I have a container, I'm going to make it a flex box, flex container, right? So I set container to it. And then I could say, hey, everything that's inside this container, each immediate child is going to be impacted by the fact that they're inside this container. So if I make a container, a div, right, make this a flex container, then each child in there, I could say, align these all vertically, or align these all horizontally. And it'll align all my children vertically or horizontally, right? So that's flex direction, vertically or horizontally. Or don't allow them to wrap when they get to the end of the row. Or allow them to wrap, right? So I could set wrapping. I could set justify content. Put all the children to the left. Put them to the right. Put them to the middle. Make equal space between them, you know? I could also vertically align them. Make them up the top. Make them at the bottom. So it just does that to all the children inside the container. So it's really nice. We're going to do some JavaScript here in a minute. Ajax. I hear you guys are doing that Wednesday. What's up? I think you left this. Is that yours?
Yeah. I came in to get a file and
Oh.
normally come in. Is that cool?
Yeah. Come on in. So that's Flexbox. And so we're going to see how that was applied here in this layout. Check this out, Rio. Log in, create an account, and I want to be Hound Dog. Well,
Are you there? Awesome.
wait, that one's there. That one's not.
Awesome.
Checking the database to see who has what names
Stroke by
through
stroke. Is it on Blur?
Ajax.
Ajax?
It's on Add Eventlistener and on
Keychain? Key up?
I think it's like input change or something. I gotta look. Let me see. What is it? That's a good question. Sign up. Add Eventlistener input. So there's input. That way, if you left key, right key through the field, you're not sending things over the server, which would be key up. That's what I was thinking originally. And then all my last class at Fresno State, I did a code review with Daniel where he just told me what was wrong with my code. So he's like, that should be input. This is why.
Because you use tabs. People use tabs too.
Yeah, or go between fields and right.
Awesome.
So
Nice.
the first thing we have here is a template header. Okay? And then we have template header 2. So I don't know about this design decision. I haven't seen somebody else do this, but I was kind of interested in not repeating code, obviously. So I have one file here for headers and footers where I define different templates. I define header right here, I define header 2 right there, and I define footer right there. So that's kind of like some chunks of the page. So the first chunk of the page, the first header, starts the page out, doc type, HTML, and then opens my head and then puts in things I want in every page on my site. So all those links, every page on my site, including one main style CSS, right? And then after on this page, I also want to have sign up CSS, some CSS specific just to this one page. Some design considerations about that, right? Well, now I've made 2 requests to the server, and that's a cost, a performance cost. Maybe I could have put all my CSS in one file and gotten it with 1 request, and it'd all be cached, right? But then that 1 request file on the initial page load, first time someone's to my site's that much bigger. So maybe that much more of a millisecond to get down. I don't know, trade-offs. Probably just splitting hairs, but just thinking about it. But I think this is a pretty good setup right here. So that actually gets put right after this, right there, right? Because it takes this chunk of code and it puts all that right here. That's template header. All right? And then it takes this template header 2, all this code, and puts it right after. So it ends my head section. So I'm dynamically building this page. Right? That's why I wanted just like, let me first do the design in HTML and make sure it's all working, and then bring it over and break it up. Okay? Because now if I need to fix, like, this is the header part right here, which is all this up here. And so if I need to fix that, I don't want to have to fix that for 80 pages in 80 places. I want to fix it in one place. Right? So I got the, and notice how on this one file, I've defined many templates. So your template, if it doesn't have define and a name and then end, your template is automatically the file name and everything that's on the page. Okay? Or you could have a page with a bunch of little template chunks defined on it. So I call this page headers, footers, just to keep this free of a bunch of clutter, my file system free of a bunch of clutter. And I can never call headers, footers. But I could call all these because on here they are all defined. Maybe I could call headers, footers. I haven't done that. But that wouldn't make sense to call that. All right, so we'll see how the Go handles that in a second. But there I got my headers. And then I have my footer down here, which just basically ends the document. So if I ever wanted to add some like footer navigation bar or something at the bottom, which probably I would, about us, whatever, right? Then that's where that would go.
Your footer right now is just a closing thing?
Yeah, that's it right here. It's just like body HTML ending tags right there.
So you can add more to it? Is that the idea?
Yeah. Eventually, I might put in here, like, a lot of websites. Like, here's a website that a friend of mine did. Well, actually, he's not a friend. He's an acquaintance. And that's totally cool. And he's trying to change democracy, where representatives don't make votes in Congress based upon what they think is best, but their constituents all are polled on every issue and tell the representative for each issue, vote this way. So it doesn't matter, right? But the question is, will it work? Will people really want to vote on every issue or stay up to date with every issue? So what you have to do is, like in my community, there are people who are political centers of influence. Like I'll just give my ballot to Bob Merrill, right, and say fill it out. Because he researches it and he stays current. So Bob could have votes given to him. I could say, I trust Bob to place all my votes. He becomes a micro-representative. He might have 800 people in Fresno who he represents, who they all know Bob researches this and votes the way I would like to vote if I had the time to research it. And then Bob could cast all those 800 votes, right? And then the representative sees, okay, there's this many votes for, that many against. I got to vote this way because that's what people want. And it's all blockchain, military-grade encryption. And they got $400,000 of funding, and then they just, somebody else right now is in the talks for giving them $10 million worth of funding. And they pitched it to some other VC a couple of months ago, VC who funded Facebook, and that VC said, no thanks, we'll pass, and then went out and created Brigade, which is the exact same thing, right? And so, now they got a competitor. Isn't that crap, dude? You pitched it.
They didn't have to do an NDA for the pitch?
I don't know, but I doubt it.
Are they the ones that won 59 days of code?
Huh? Yeah, they won 50 days of code. He's from
59.
Fresno.
Yeah, I saw their presentation. It was good.
Yeah. So he's doing pretty good. And so the reason I know about this is like this guy's like my old school friend right here. Job. But I forget why I started telling you that. Footer. So we're going to look at footers. So they got this, right? That little footer right there. Maybe we'd want that to show up at the bottom of every page. Does that show up at the bottom of every page? No. But that does, right? So.
It's like polymer. real design.
So that's headers and footers. So here's autocomplete off. So that setting right there prevents the drop-down auto completions, right? So I didn't want that to show up because it'd block out the message, hey, this is taken, this is not taken, right? Does that make sense? Like right here, right here, when I go here, fine, autocomplete's on, okay? But here, if I had autocomplete popping up, then I'm not going to be able to see that message. It's going to be overwritten. I love that, by the way, right there. Like that's like, whoa, that's so cool. Because if you look at the JavaScript on the back end in the console, you can see it, right? As I'm adding characters, it's sending those grabbing them and sending them over. That's a long username. So the next thing is right here. I get references to all of the different elements on my page, all the different DOM, document object model, all the different DOM elements. Is that what you call them? Objects?
Nodes.
Nodes. That's good. And so that's just JavaScript. Document query select, or document query selector. How many people have seen that? Okay. So if you haven't seen that, that's JavaScript. And that gives me access through JavaScript. Like right here, I'm saying give me username. And here's a ID username. So that gives me access to that node in the DOM. And I could then programmatically start doing things to it. I could change its attributes. I could change its value. So here I added event listener. So I'm adding that to username, which is the where you enter your username. It's this one, it's the ID. So ID versus name, what's the difference? So ID is I want to target this item by its ID through JavaScript. Name is like I'm naming a variable. What variable am I naming? I'm naming the variable the form is going to send on submission. So this is what I'll be accessing when I retrieve the variables from the form. And this is what I'm accessing when I'm trying to identify that node to programmatically target it. It makes sense, right? ID versus name, naming a variable, ID identifying something. JavaScript's going to identify using that name, the ID. When I submit the form, the value will be assigned to that variable, which will be available on the server. And we can see that in the Go code. Right here, username. Request form value username. So get the username over there on that side. So here I'm saying username, add event listener. So I'm going to be listening for something. If you're wondering how does add event listener work, MDN. Right? So target add event listener type, listener use capture. Okay, so we can say, I don't know what that means. Let me see some examples. So add event listener type, click. Usage, modify text. Modify text is a function. And then false. So false is the use capture. So type, listener, use capture. And this is optional. So in Bacchus-Knorr form, or EBNF, extended Bacchus-Knorr form, brackets mean optional. So I could just include type and listener. And the listener is a function. So the object that receives a notification when an event of the specified type occurs, this must be an object implementing event listener interface, or simply a JavaScript function. Okay, well, I'll just use a JavaScript function then. And here are all the events, right? So this is called a type, but over here it's event, so that's kind of confusing. But I can listen for a click, I can listen for a blur, I can listen for, key down, key up. And on this list, you do not see, I was listening for input, so I was thinking it might be something else. So input's right there. So input is fired when the value of an input text array element is changed. So as I change by adding something, it fires. I got to connect a mouse. Hold on. Oh, did I take that over to my office? I did. Never mind, I don't have it. My mouse is, both my mice, out of commission. It's sad for me. Maybe if I try this one over here.
Is it your battery or your connection?
I don't know, man. Like one of my mice got dropped, and that's why it stopped working.
That might.
But now, I just changed batteries. Is there a way to resync?
Generally hold down the connect.
I don't see a connect.
On there. Sometimes it's by the battery. Underneath there. Yeah, in there. Is there a button?
No, I don't see one there either. C'est la vie. So when there's input, we're going to run this function. This function goes from here to there. Okay, so that's one function. What's that function do? It's going to console log the username value. So where's username coming from? Document query select username. It's my form, right? It's this username, and value is what's been entered into it. Okay, so value is whatever's been entered. Right there, the value would now be here. So when you're choosing how do I get the value inside something, you might see value, or you might see text content, or you might see inner text, or you might see inner HTML. Like those are all choices. So value is for forms. And even there, finally I got it. Values for forms. Give me the value of that form. Because that's one of the options we could put. So I could start out with a form value here of something. So if I refresh this, the value is now something. It's no longer a placeholder. Placeholder is to as soon as I click in there, gone. Or as soon as I type, gone, right? It's placeholder. But here, I click in here, no, not gone. That's the value. So that's when you're doing forms, it's like you're getting the value. When you're doing a paragraph, you could do inner HTML, you could do inner text, or you could do text content. Which one do you use? Inner HTML, inner text, text content. All right? Well, we got 3 choices.
Well, I would use inner HTML for a node and text content for if I just want to get the text without the tags.
So inner text is like an old IE thing. Don't use inner text. Text content is going to escape all of your stuff. So if we look at MDN text content, we could see, and there's inner text. Text content avoids an excess attack vector. Kind of funky language for just saying that if somebody tries to stick a script tag in, it's just text. I'm not putting HTML or scripts in there. Inner HTML will put it in. Okay? So precision, nuances, but they're important. right? Like, you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get jacked.
What if
'Cause-
someone tried to paste a picture?
Huh?
What if someone tried to paste a picture?
I don't
Copy
know.
and paste a picture.
Into a form field?
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Or if you wanted there to be a picture there instead of the text.
I'm sure there's some way to do that. I don't have that prepared for lecture. Research it. Come back. Let us know.
All right.
Will the form accept anything besides string?
I just think it wouldn't allow paste.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think unless you do an image upload or you've done HTML5 for drag and drop images.
No, I've done it before where I pasted pictures into those fields, and sometimes they show the picture.
It's
And you're
cool.
able to log in with those as your username or your password.
That seems impossible.
That's awesome.
It's a pretty good password, actually.
All right, so we're logging the username value, and then we do, here is Ajax. That's it. Like right there. That's Ajax. It's kind of got a big scary name. Axe. It ends with Axe. Right? It's an acronym. Must be complicated. It deserves its own acronym. You know? And it's kind of big words. Asynchronous, JavaScript, and XML. Right? Except nobody uses XML anymore. And XML just by itself is confusing. Because XML, it's like an acronym with an acronym. Asynchronous Java and XML. Well, what's XML? It's another acronym. What's it stand for? Extensible Markup Language. Ah! Extensible? That sounds like it's huge. It just extends? Nobody likes XML. Right? XML sucks, which is why we all use JSON. They should really call it AJAJ. Because it's asynchronous, JavaScript, and JSON. Or they should just say AJAS. Asynchronous Java and string. Asynchronous JavaScript and string. Because all you're doing is sending a string. That string could be a string, that's it, just a string of text. Or it could be a string formatted as JSON, because that's what JSON does. It's just like, here's a string that we formatted with certain brackets and braces. That's it. So to do Ajax, you don't need jQuery. jQuery sucks. So jQuery was created to help bridge differences between browsers in like 2007, 8, and 9. It's because you used to have to write one set of JavaScript for one browser, another set for another browser. jQuery said, look, use this, just write it once, and we've done the rest for you. But the problem with jQuery is that jQuery will do, when you measure performance, jQuery will do 350,000 operations a second for a certain operation when you compare it against different frameworks and languages, whereas JavaScript can do that 12 million times in the same second. It's like a factor multitude, like phenomenally creeping slower than JavaScript. Why would you ever use jQuery? Here, another measurement, jQuery, 19,000 things in a second, 8 million. Just straight up plain old vanilla JavaScript can do that. 8 million times. jQuery can only do it 20,000 times in a second. Right? That's like saying, oh, cool, let's use jQuery because it's a Ferrari. Yeah, it was a Ferrari built in 1912. Right? Like your Toyota Camry goes faster. You just want to use JavaScript. And but jQuery, I write less code. Really? You want me to turn this into jQuery? There, it's jQuery. That's like basically jQuery. It allows you to, prevents you from writing that or something stupid. I don't even know it, right? But it's like it didn't really save all that much code. And then you've learned a whole other language, which is more likely to go away soon, particularly since I'm just one more person out there saying don't use it. We had people come to our training, they're like, don't use jQuery. Max Furtman was here a year ago at this time. Here are his books. We hired him to come do a training. jQuery Mobile. He wrote that book February 2012. Do you know what he said to us in October of 2014? Don't use jQuery. He wrote the book on it. This guy said directly to me, do not use JSON. Okay, have I said it enough? Sorry, I just have to proselytize sometimes. It's in my genes. I had a preacher for a grandpa. Not only was he a preacher, he's a hellfire and brimstone Pentecostal preacher with, unfortunately, a kind of intense fierceness, which to me is kind of like antithetical to Jesus Christ's love. Right? There's an intense fierceness. It's weird when you know people and their family and you love them and they also have things which aren't lovable. But I think that's everybody you get close enough to, you know. But some people have got more of it than others. You guys want to like play the guitar and sing some songs now?
Oh, I almost brought my guitar.
So this is all you need for Ajax. What is that doing? First of all, you're creating a new object. What type of object? It's an XML HTTP request. That's it. So I call that anything I want. I have intimidatingly called mine XHR because one of my code mentors called his XHR. And I thought, well, that kind of makes sense. It's XML HTTP request. So I'm going to call it XHR. But that's kind of intimidating. XHR, what the hell's that? Right? Maybe I could have called it Pink Bunny and it would have been more palatable. Or White Kitten or Soft Puppy. So XHR open. I open my request. And I'm going to post, and I'm going to post to this URL. I'm going to send this value here can either be null, as, do I have any other ones? I don't. That could either be null, I have one here, to-do list. Right here, null, right? It could either be null, or it could be some value, some string I'm going to send over. If I'm only sending a single string, you don't need to stringify it. You don't need to stick it into JSON. I'm only sending a single string. So in this example, I was sending more than a string right here, right? Well, actually, no, I was only sending text. So I didn't need to do all that, right? But here I turned it into JSON. Added a level of complexity I didn't need to add, it looks like. Okay, so that just, what's the difference between just regular old text and JSON? So that's just a string of text on the right. That's what it looks like as JSON. I think I need to change that. String, maybe I could make it an object. Object empty. I don't know how to use this. Let me append. Okay, name, Todd. So that's kind of cool to see. I can't zoom today because my mouse isn't working. That's kind of cool to see, like, oh, that's what the JSON looked like. Curly braces and the name Todd. What if I had another name here? So okay. Can I add a new object? Are these each objects? Seems like that's one object. What about type, slice? That's what it looks like as a slice. And then maybe here, append. It's an error one, but can I append an object? So I could add a slice with a bunch of objects in it, and then here, append. There's somebody who named their son Cowboy. So it's kind of a crazy looking chunk of JSON, not very logical, but you start to see. Fun to play with. Like when you're like, how do I wrap my head around JSON? Come over here and play with it. We're talking about Ajax. That's not the page I want. This is the page I want. So I put in a string, and then I add another event listener. And so this is the last part of Ajax right here that's, I mean, all of that's important, but the response text. So ready state change and the response text are the other things. So I add an event listener, ready state change is, it's listening for a change in state. And then I have a function in that event listener, which goes to here, right? And so I'm going to get the response text. Oh, no wonder that's giving me that thing. I need to check for state 4. All right, so usually what you do, it's funny, I just found another thing. I say if XAR ready state 4. Because there's different states to Ajax. I can see I'm like letting you be confused by Ajax. I apologize for that. So Ajax MDN. This is probably going to give us too much stuff. Getting started. Maybe that'll be interesting. This is good. And here are my ready states. So uninitialized, loading, loaded, interactive. All I need is it's complete, which means I send everything over to the server. We're complete. I think that is. Maybe it means something came back. So ready state change for parse response text. Something came back. So let's see what happens when the server receives this. Okay. So this is a add event listener for the input. And when we have input, it's going to API check username. And so when we go look at the main Go file, and we look at what does check username do, API check username runs this function. So this function here reads the request body, so what was sent to us by Ajax, turns that into a byte slice, and then I turn that into a string, and then I log that, and then I create a variable named user of type user, which has an underlying type of struct. It's this. And then I do new key, and then I get information, and then I send back false or true. Okay? So here it's receiving back some response, and it's either false or true. I wonder if I add this line in here, if ready state equals 4. Because right now, you'll see this in action. So right now, what this looks like is like this. Okay, so I click in here, A, and I got 2 falses. It console logged A, and then gave me nothing and 2 falses. B, console logged AB, gave me nothing and 2 falses. So what if I add this in? Is that going to change that? So right here, that, and then I need a closing paren. And where do I want that closing paren? Is going to be right after this one. There we go. So now only when ready state is 4 instead of all the ready states. So let's see how that changes things. And with App Engine, this server will rebuild. So I don't need to do anything. So let me just come over here and hit refresh. So remember I had space and 2 falses. So now A, B, C, much cleaner, right? So I'm only checking that last one. So ready states changed several times, but only when it hit 4, which was this one, did we say, okay, it's complete, let's check it.
When you used BS for a slice of bytes, was that the type that it is returned in? So you didn't have to. So
that took me a second to figure out last night. But when I have my request body, if there's a form value, I could get that with like request dot, like I could do request dot form value and then give it like username. and it'll give me the username because a form's been submitted. But if I only have this request body, how do I gain access to it? Well, request body is like the server sent me a page. Here it is. Well, I got to read it, right? So let's read it. So I read it all. And read all, just when we look at the documentation on that, read all returns a slice of bytes. And so I know just from hanging out with Go stuff, I could take a slice of bytes and I could use conversion and make it a string.
So I understand the JavaScript part of validation. I already learned all that kind of stuff, but where are you actually grabbing it from the database?
So right here, we come to check username, right?
Right, but how
And
does that interact with the JavaScript?
we get the request body, which is that text I entered, okay? And I turn that into SBS, and then I say, give me a new key, not an incomplete key where App Engine's going to finish it by assigning some unique ID. I'm doing a new key, and a new key means I got to give it the context, the kind, and either a unique identifier, which is going to be either some string right here, or some int, right? So whichever one I don't give it, I make nil. And it's kind of interesting to actually look at new incomplete key in the I bet you it's right next to new key in the code. So here's a new incomplete key. And what's new incomplete key do? It returns new key and passes in the context, the kind, nothing and nothing, and then the parent if there is one. So when it passes in nothing and nothing here to new key, right, App Engine knows to create a key if neither of those are present. It's kind of interesting. So here, I do say, give me a key with, with SBS as the key, because that's how I've stored in data store. I've made the key by which I access my users. The key is the username, right? And so as I type in, HOUND, it's like looking. Let me look. I got a key which will. I create the key. I've got a key. Now I could use that to go to the data store and get that thing. And if there is an error, there is no user, right? So if the error is not nil, error non-nil means there is an error, right? It's not a nil, right? And if there is an error, there is no user. So I'm sending back false, no user. Okay? Otherwise, I'm sending back true. There was a user. So even though I populate this user deal because I have to, I don't do anything with it. All I'm doing is looking at the error. Because data store get, when you look at the documentation, says loads the entity stored for the key into the destination, key destination, which must be a struct pointer or implement property load saver if there's no such. So when you're storing stuff from App Engine, you have to store it into a struct pointer. So you can see here, I put, this is a struct, right? And that's a pointer, the address. Take the address just when you need it. Don't take it before. So you got to stick anything from the data store into a struct pointer. So the address. Here at this address, I have a struct. If there is no such entity for the key, get returns error, no such entity. So if there's no such entity for the key, I looked it up, there's no such entity, get returns the error. And so if the error is not nil, right, that means false, nobody was found there. And when I send that back to JavaScript, if I am's true, that username's taken, otherwise, nothing. Text content, not value, because name error is a paragraph. Where is it? Right. Wait. Where is it? Username. It should be right here. Oh, because I called name error. There we go. Username error. There we go. That's the connection. Awesome, huh? So that's that little part with Ajax. Not too bad. You now have the code. You could take that code and like use it like, okay, how do I use it? I mean, and this is cool, but when I was like, oh, how do I do this? Well, let me go back and look at, Summer Web Bootcamp. And, let me see. I could search this whole repository, and I could search it for ready state change. Right? And then boom, here are all the files with that in it. And I can start looking at like examples from Bootcamp. And okay, let me just look at, I just want to see, I like the way that, JavaScript was explained by Ray Villalobos. So let me just go ahead and take a look at like the different ways Ray explained it and see how he did it, That's really cool about GitHub. So what's the next thing? Is for the passwords. Add Eventlistener. So on submit, I'm adding this to the form. So on the whole form submit, and this is really important, right? There's a function, so another Eventlistener, and a function, and I could pass in the event. So or you're not passing it in. It kind of seems like it is. I don't know how the hell that works. That's JavaScript. But you stick like some variable name in there, some identifier, and somebody has some better way to explain it, tell me. You stick an identifier in there, and then you could access pretty much this object to which the event occurred, right? I don't know why you don't just put form user prevent default. You don't. Right? Because it's only for this one little thing. It's only for this event. It's not for the whole time.
Can you just do this stop prevent default?
Maybe. Probably.
Because this refers to form user in this case.
Probably. So here I'm just running validate password function and OK, setting a variable equal to OK. So if text content is equal to nothing, well, what's happening here? When I run this, it takes the Pierre text content. Oh, I kind of like that Pierre. Takes Pierre text content and sets it to nothing. So that's just Pierre is password error, which is right here. So it's saying this stuff right here, right between these two tags is nothing. Okay, I'm just making sure that that's nothing. And then if P1 value is equal to emptiness, the error Pierre text contents enter password and return false. So if this is false and I take the opposite of false, that becomes true, right? And if that's true, this code runs where it prevents the submission of the form. Exit that function. I can't submit the form. You don't have to undo prevent default. Last night I was like, how do you undo prevent default once you set it? It was only set for that one time through the function and it's ready to go again. And next time it goes again, it'll check. And if it's not right, it's not going to submit. But as soon as it is right, it's not going to run this code here, right? And you're good. So, I return false, right? Because it's not okay. So, okay, false, right? And for this to run, it has to be not okay. I kind of like the way that reads, not okay. And then here, again, I return false because P1 value didn't equal P2 value. And then here, everything is fine. So I return true, in which case not true becomes false. And that doesn't run, and we're good. So it can be submitted. So this right here is a great template, right? There's like so much good stuff going on here, from Go to HTML to CSS to JavaScript. Like this is such a good little example. And if you're even kind of like, okay, I'm getting that, most of that, I'll probably have to spend a little time playing with it. But I could see that most of you are like, some of you are Daniel's like, oh, no problem. I think there's something about the name Daniel. If your name Daniel, you're going to be good with code. Like all the Daniels I know are like really good coders. Whoa. Too bad it wasn't your first name. You'd be amazing. So that's a really great example. And there's a lot going on there, not to be discounted or underestimated. Like if you look at that, you show this to most people, they'll be like, I could never learn that. But you guys are grokking it, and gals. Right? Y'all are getting it. And that's a lot to be sort of like, cool, man, I've learned something. So you can look at the sign up HTML, CSS, which is in here, to see how that's all styled. Not too much. And you can see the flex stuff. And then the last thing for us to look at, we saw how check username works. We have create user. So when the form actually gets submitted, I don't need to send JSON over and deal JSON. It's a form submission. That's happening naturally for me. It's sending all that stuff over. Why would I want to keep them on this page anyhow? Right? We're done with this page. So I don't need to use JSON and then redirect them. I'm just letting that form submit. So you got to know when to use JSON and when not to use it. And generally speaking, use JavaScript as little as possible. And always use it in such a way that if JavaScript's not working on that client, everything's still going to be fine. So that's graceful degradation. Sometimes people call it progressive enhancement. It's two ways of looking at the same thing. Right? Graceful degradation, just so you can see it, versus progressive enhancement. Progressive enhancement means starts at the very bottom and builds up complexity, but even if you're at the very bottom, it runs. Even if only HTML is showing, it runs. And graceful degradation means, hey, here's the whole stack. As we start ripping things away, is it still running? I don't know. I think there's slight differences and nuances between those terms, but that's what they mean to me. So we have the form come in. So we just create a new user, right? And the new user is of type user, and that is defined right here. It's a struct with those fields. Cool. And we'll see what this means here in a second. And then we get the form values, and we put them into there. I might need to undo something. I think I might have just found an error, which is why I was pausing. And so that's cool. We get those from the form. And then data store new key, not a new incomplete key. And the key is going to be the username. No, that's right. And then we're going to put the context, the key, and then that data. And you got to use the address. So pointer to a struct. And if there's an error, log error f, and then send back that there's an error. So log is App Engine log here. And you can't do print line. You got to use log error f, info f, cosmic explosion f. There's like a couple of different f's on log. Like seriously, if you look at it, it's like, what's the difference between all this? So Golang App Engine. And then I want to look in here under services at log. And inside log, look at the reference. And I thought, are they variables? Done. I thought that's where, see there's arraf, there's infof. What is C, App Engine new context? I don't know where those are listed. Maybe it's under context that you do that stuff, but where's the logging? I thought it was like log. Confuses me sometimes. I don't know. Find it later. And then I just redirect back to the home page after we put all that stuff in here. So this right here says don't send that to the data store. And you could find that in the documentation under data store. Which is under storing data. Data store, reference. And those are called tags, kind of like tags that we could also use in Go with JSON to like sort of rename or connect different named items to each other. but here's the tag for I is that, and I is ignored entirely by the data store. And the reason I'm ignoring it is because I'm sticking I in as the key. So I don't want to store that twice. You guys want to see that? Let's see it in action. It's always cool. Leave the bird. So I just changed that. App Engine rebuilt. Come over here and get rid of all that stuff. Too much at gmail.com. And bird 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3. So here's my what it looks like now, and now I'll submit and then do this, and it added username, right? Key name is bird, but then it also added username. I don't want that, man. I only need that crap in there once, right? So ignore that one, ignore username because I'm using that as the key, so let's get rid of this one. And this is a good illustration of schema-less. If this was SQL, SQL would be like, ah, you didn't define that schema before you started using that database. You want to change the table? You got to like do all this other stuff to change the table. Here I'm like, add another field, right? Except in NoSQL schema-less databases, they're not called fields, they're called properties, right? The table is the kind, the fields are the properties, and the records are the entities, right? There's an entity. So I'm going to delete that one, and then come back here and just resubmit. Bird. Cool. So that's checking a username. That's creating a user. This is what needs to be left to be done to make this nice. So I'll be working on that probably Monday because I got a bunch of crap, other stuff to do. And then here's all the routing. And that's using Julian Schmidt's router. So that's how you'd set that up. And then right here, Daniel out of Fresno State was like, dude, use Memcache for all your templates. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, 'cause it's a lot faster. You get a little performance boost, right? Like you're pulling this out of Memcache. Memcache is faster than, you know, having to wherever the other thing is. I don't know, right? Maybe it's on the disk somewhere, but execute the template every time. You could, once the template's executed, you could store that in Memcache and then check if it's in Memcache and get that. And if it's not, then you go render the template, stick it back in Memcache. I'm like, all right, show me. And like in 4 minutes, he's like, there you go. I haven't got it working yet, but it's like that's awesomeness waiting to happen right there. So you could meditate on that one. But that's just like extra material right there. So that's called a code review. Was that awesome or what? Was that like a really good hour of goes? Cool, man. Look at what you can do. And not too bad, but it's super low level, right? Like we're not abstracting anything away here. We're not relying on somebody else to build us some framework which creeps along, like PHP or like nothing is as fast as Go. The thing that comes closest, the general metric I saw, was that it's dude, I invited my boss to barbecue like last Friday night. He's just now getting back to me. Anyhow, nothing's faster. Maybe he thinks it's for tomorrow.
I just got a message on Facebook from somebody I wrote to 3 years ago.
That's worse. That's even more of a delay.
He had given up.
So I hope this has been of value to you. Let's hear your guys' presentations. Let me shut this down. Oh, I will say that if you're watching this on the internet, go follow me on Twitter because that will help me out. And if you got some value out of this talk, you know, following me on Twitter apparently is like the thing. I'm just getting used to that. And then also on YouTube, if you can follow me, YouTube, Todd McLeod. I'm going to start adding this to all the end of my videos. And yeah, follow me on there. That'll help me out. And I think that's it. Those two places. Thank you.